The Great Plains. The story of the American frontier is often told as a saga of human ambition, with settlers, soldiers, and native tribes locked in fierce struggles. But the toll was not only human. The land itself became both battleground and victim, its creatures drawn into the terrible undertow of progress. Between 1850 and 1865, one of the most devastating forces was the relentless demand for the American buffalo, or bison, a keystone species on which entire ecosystems and indigenous ways of life had long relied. With hunters, traders, and an expanding railroad slicing through the plains, the buffalo faced an unprecedented slaughter, and with each hunt, a deeper tragedy unfolded. By 1850, the booming hide market pulled hunters into the far west plains. Commercial hunters set their sights on bison herds, killing for hides that could be sold for their toughness and durability, leaving the rest of the animal to rot on the open plains. The hide trade was both an economic and environmental disaster, leaving native communities in its wake to face starvation and displacement. For the Plains tribes, the bison was not merely food. It was a spiritual and cultural lifeblood, centered to their survival, their rituals, and their daily life. But the herds, once numbering in the millions, were nearly decimated within a decade, driving the native populations toward starvation. In desperation, many reluctantly accepted the federal government's demands to move onto reservations, places promising little but confinement and dependence on meager government rations. After the Civil War, even greater forces conspired against the bison. The booming leather industry demanded tougher hides to power machinery, and innovations in rifle accuracy allowed hunters to kill more buffalo with ruthless efficiency. The railroad, once the promise of American expansion, now bisected the plains, cutting migration paths in half, forcing herds to splinter and become more vulnerable to slaughter. The environmental devastation was profound, and for the native tribes, it was as if the invisible hand was slowly strangling their lives from them. In 1862, starvation again drove a native nation to war. The Dakota Sioux of Minnesota, struggling against broken promises and empty storehouses, rose up in what would become known as the Dakota War of 1862. Under the leadership of Chief Little Crow, the Dakota fought fiercely, killing over 1,000 settlers before federal troops ended the uprising with grim finality. After the fighting subsided, the U.S. government put 400 Dakota on trial in what would become the largest mass execution in American history. 38 Dakota warriors were hanged, their deaths leaving an indelible scar on the nation's conscience and marking yet another chapter of broken promises and bloodshed. Meanwhile, the atrocities of the West continued to mount. In 1864, the Sand Creek Massacre in Colorado would stand as one of the darkest episodes of the American Indian Wars. Tensions in Colorado had been simmering as settlers and native communities vied for control over land and resources. Governor John Evans, seeking to isolate native populations, invited quote-unquote friendly Indians to camp near military forts, promising them protection and supplies. The Cheyenne, led by Chief Black Kettle, accepted these promises, eager to establish a peaceful coexistence. In August, Black Kettle and other chiefs met with Evans, and it seemed, if briefly, that a new era of peace might be possible. The chiefs left satisfied, hopeful that their people could finally avoid the violence sweeping the plains. Following orders, Black Kettle and his band moved to Fort Lyon, Colorado, and took up residence along Sand Creek. Commanding officers even suggested that Black Kettle and his people hunt around the area, assuring them that they were safe from the militia's patrols. But on a cold November morning, the militia, led by Colonel John Shivington, stormed the encampment at Sand Creek, despite Black Kettle's prominent display of a white flag of surrender. Chivington's men unleashed merciless fire on the Cheyenne, killing 270 people, including women and children, in an assault that defied every convention of war. The massacre did not end with death. Soldiers returned to the scene, systematically killing the wounded and mutilating the dead, their bloody work a grim display of contempt. They set fire to the village, burning everything that remained in Sand Creek as the final insult to those who had sought peace. At first, Chivington's actions were praised by some of his contemporaries, viewed through the lens of a necessary victory. But as the details of the massacre became public, the praise soured into horror and outrage. The brutality, the indiscriminate killing, and the intentional targeting of non-combatants tarnished Chivington's reputation, and he was forced to resign, forfeiting a promising political future. Yet the damage was done. Sand Creek became a powerful symbol of betrayal and loss, forever ingrained into the Cheyenne's memory. Among the survivors of that dreadful day was Black Kettle himself. Remarkably, he continued to strive for peace, even after the massacre that had shattered his trust in the U.S. government. Black Kettle, despite all that had happened, held a vision of coexistence, hoping to shield his people from the unending conflict of the Great Plains. In 1865, he agreed to a new reservation in Indian Territory, a desperate attempt to bring an end to the ruthless bloodshed that claimed so many lives.